Okay, I had this posted on my BitChute channel, but if people will listen to this is a very, very simple and easy to understand, no fancy NASA stuff or anything involved in debunking the flat earthers, debunking the globe. So let's just go on.
You throughout this video. Let's begin. Number one extremely problematic side effect of taking the globe and flattening it out into a plane is that gravity makes no sense, and there is no reason for things to fall to the ground. All objects accelerate towards the ground at 9.8 meters per second squared. That's an indisputable fact, and it is also an indisputable fact that any acceleration requires a force to produce it. This is how cars drive, planes fly, people walk, cats jump. It's how literally all motion works. Even charlatans like the globe busters accept at least this much, which is why they go off on their rants about magnetic magic, as you may have seen in my previous video. But quite comically, most flat earthers don't even do this. Most of you address this problem by simply listing two words: density and buoyancy. Well, I hate to break it to you guys, but these are not forces. Forces are vectors. They have a magnitude, which means a numerical amount, and a direction, which means they have to point somewhere. Density is simply mass per unit volume, or how much matter sits in a particular space. It doesn't point anywhere. And buoyancy is simply a measurement of an object's tendency to float. So allow me to repeat. These are not forces. This is trivial to prove. You say that objects fall down because they are more dense than the air below them. Why down? Why not up? Or sideways? When you let go of a ball, there is air all around it. How does it know to fall down? Also, objects fall down when they are in a vacuum, which means there is no air below them. What's happening there? Face the facts. Things accelerate down towards the ground because of a downward force. That force is gravity, which pulls everything towards the center of the Earth, which is its center of mass. Denser things displace less dense things because gravity exists. More mass means a greater gravitational attraction. This is clearly why things that are less dense than water float on water. Again, because gravity exists. Rocks are pulled down harder than water, which is pulled down harder than air. Some of your more popular retorts to this include wondering how oceans stay on the Earth while birds and insects can fly. It's because birds and insects have wings. They flap them and generate an upward force. If that force exceeds the gravitational force, they go up. Oceans can't do this because oceans don't have wings. Individual water molecules can't evaporate and go up into the sky because they are so tiny. But when they get up to where it is colder and accumulate into clouds, they eventually condense back into liquid water. And guess what happens? They fall back down as rain. Hopefully you are familiar with rain. As for planes and other macroscopic objects, again, they go up only when a force is applied. When you throw a ball up into the sky, the force imparted on the ball by your arm is greater than the gravitational force. But as soon as it leaves your hand, no more force is being applied, and only the gravitational force is acting upon the ball. So that velocity gets smaller and smaller, hits zero, at which point it starts to fall, and it falls faster and faster until it hits the ground. Gravity. Gravity exists, period. Saying it is just a theory does nothing but display that you have no idea what a theory is. Stop repeating what you hear on Flat Earth videos and catch up to the 17th century. Number two, flat earthers all say, I shouldn't see this thing, but I do, so the Earth is flat. Then, to justify this claim, you all say the same thing, typically with no context whatsoever. 8 inches per mile squared. None of you have any idea what this means. You can't derive it. You can't calculate anything with it. You can't make a prediction with it. You can't tell me anything about this value at all. When I point this out to you, you get very angry, and instead of answering simple questions, you just link me to a bunch of videos made by con men. Well, I'm sorry, friends. Those people are doing incorrect math, or lying, or both, and they are counting on the fact that you won't do any math at all to check up on them. 8 inches per mile squared is not a valid way to measure Earth's curvature. If you understood math, you would immediately see that this squared on miles is totally out of place. That's because this is a parabolic approximation. This is for doing calculations with a parabola. It's possible that you remember this shape from middle school algebra, but I wouldn't be surprised if you don't. As you can see, the Earth is not shaped like this. So where does it come from, and why do people use it? It comes from the Flat Earth Bible, Zetetic astronomy. and flat earth priests use it because they know it's not accurate. It gives them incorrect values that they can use to claim that they shouldn't be able to see something when in fact they totally should. There are dozens of videos on YouTube demonstrating this, several of which reference the actual formula that actually describes Earth's curvature, which as you can see requires trigonometry. Stop blindly repeating what you hear on flat Earth videos and learn some basic math so that you can do these calculations for yourself. Number 3. All flat earthers say the same two things about water. The first is, water doesn't curve, and the second is, water finds its own level. The second phrase is completely meaningless, so the fact that you all say that exact thing verbatim is just one of the many demonstrations that you all blindly repeat what you hear without giving it a moment's thought. As for the first phrase, stating that water doesn't curve is at least a coherent thought. However, it is dead wrong. Put a drop of water on a piece of wax paper or a leaf. What does it look like? A freaking sphere. Isn't that something? In your haste to mindlessly parrot what you heard from flat earth priests about water, you forgot to look at water. Water curves, my friends. Look at this curved meniscus. Look at these waves. Water curves all the time. Water is not magic. It is subject to influence by external forces just like all other matter. With a spherical water droplet, that's the electromagnetic force. Water molecules make hydrogen bonds with one another, which in this context we refer to as cohesive forces. That's why water has a very high surface tension. And that's why a water droplet remains spherical, so that it can maximize the number of hydrogen bonds that are formed and keep the system at the lowest energy possible. So clearly and indisputably, water curves. In this example, it is due to the electromagnetic force. It is therefore quite easy to understand that it can curve under the influence of any force, including gravity. The oceans conform to the curvature of the Earth just like the land does, and for the same reason. This is why saying that water finds its own level is absolutely meaningless. You think that level means flat, as though on the globe model, water should just magically project into space at some arbitrary angle. In fact, level just means as close to the center of the Earth as possible. What's most hilarious is that even in the tool called the level, which only works because gravity exists, there is a curved bubble right in there. If the bubble is curved, what is the liquid, which is mostly water, doing around that bubble? It curves. It is absolutely astonishing how the things you repeat from flat earth videos are incompatible with even the most trivial everyday observations. You should acknowledge that. Number 4. You are all quite perplexed about how Earth's atmosphere can exist next to the vacuum of space. This one is rather amusing because what's happening is that since you have no science education, your only context for the word vacuum is a vacuum cleaner. And again, because you have no science education, none of you understand how a vacuum cleaner works, which is a problem because you seem to think that outer space is a vacuum cleaner. Let's take a moment and clear this up. A vacuum is any region where there is no stuff. Here, there is stuff, like air. In space, there is no stuff, or at least very, very close to no stuff. Space is essentially empty. That's a vacuum. It is not a thing that sucks. Vacuums don't suck. Everyone say it with me together. Vacuums don't suck. Earth's atmosphere displays a gradient because gravity exists. There's a lot of atmosphere right near the ground, and then as you rise, because fewer and fewer molecules will have enough kinetic energy to go so high, it gets thinner and thinner and thinner until there's none left. Then you're in space. It's that simple. Number 5. One of your favorite little gotcha challenges is to request that we demonstrate how water can stick to a ball spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. The implication is that water and everything else should fly off of it, like a child getting thrown from a merry-go-round. Well, it's very cute that you get overwhelmed by numbers with 4 digits in them, but in actuality, the Earth spins once per day. One time in 24 hours. Get on a merry-go-round and have someone push you one time around over 24 hours. Not a very thrilling ride, is it? The issue is that the Earth is really, really big. So if instead of using rotational velocity to describe a rotating body, like a normal person, you try to use linear tangential velocity, you're going to get a pretty big number. But to be honest, it's still not really that big. Planes go more than half that speed, and sitting on a plane at cruising altitude with no turbulence is just like sitting on a chair on the ground. Flat Earth priests cite these big velocities associated with the Earth and the solar system purely for shock value, and you're falling for it. Stop doing that. Furthermore, this little water doesn't stick to a ball challenge is the strawiest straw man that was ever made of straw. The Earth is huge. It generates an enormous gravitational field. That's why everything sticks to it. A ball is very tiny. It does not generate an enormous gravitational field, so things don't stick to it. Also, unless you're doing this in space, the ball must be very close to the Earth, which, as we just said, generates an enormous gravitational field. So when water drips off the ball onto the ground, your desired demonstration of gravity fails because gravity exists. Stop asking for ridiculous and impossible demonstrations like having to build an Earth-sized object to show you how water sticks to something as big as the Earth. Number 6. Lots of you say that moonlight is cold. This is astonishing for a number of reasons. The first is that it is not related to any claim you could possibly be making in order to argue for a flat Earth. But the second and much more important detail is that it is the perfect demonstration of the fact that you have no clue how science works. Some flat Earth priest measured the temperature under the moonlight and then again under something providing shade. Wow, moonlight makes it colder. But does it? Shouldn't you add some element of control to your experiment? What's a control, you ask? Fair question. You see, your measurement isn't evidence of anything. You now have to repeat the experiment when there is no moonlight to make sure that the moonlight was indeed the cause of the discrepancy in temperature. This is something you should have learned in middle school, but don't worry, I'll finish the experiment for you. Take the measurements again on a night with a new moon so that there is no moonlight. Look at that. You'll get the same result. So the moonlight absolutely wasn't the reason for the discrepancy in temperature. What was the reason? Well, that thing that is providing the shade from the moonlight is also trapping in heat that is emanating from the Earth while it faces away from the sun. So, case closed. I'll link to at least one empirical demonstration of this fact in the description below. See how important it is to know how to do a science experiment? Maybe you should actually learn science rather than just repeating what you hear on flat Earth videos. Number 7. Many of you say some unintelligible nonsense about water flowing uphill, or that on the globe model some rivers flow uphill. This one is so stupid that I genuinely can't believe any human could fall for it. You'll look at a globe and say that a river flows this way and that this is somehow uphill, because you seem to think that up on the screen is some kind of universal up in space. Well, how about if I turn this a little bit? What do you know? Now it's down. Listen up. There is no up and down in space. This is not up. This is not down. To believe so would be as dumb as thinking that on Earth, whichever way you happen to be facing is north. No one on Earth is upside down or on their side. Up on Earth is away from the surface of the Earth, no matter where you are on the Earth. Rivers flow from higher elevation to lower elevation, which is a measure of how far away you are from the surface of the Earth. This has nothing to do with flowing in any particular direction along the surface. This is also why people who make videos acting confused about why elevation doesn't change between various sea level locations around the world are among the dumbest people alive. This is sea level. This is sea level. This is above sea level. This is above sea level. That's what elevation means. Learn the definitions of words before you try to use them in a sentence. Number 8. Many flat earthers remain dumbfounded by the idea that the Earth is slightly closer to the sun in winter than in summer. As I've said before, winter up north is summer down south and vice versa, so your confusion is one of northern hemisphere narcissism, but it is also one of complete ignorance. Here's the Earth. Here's the light coming from the sun. Look at this portion. It hits the Earth straight on. Look at this portion. Because of the curvature of the Earth, the light hits the surface at an angle and is therefore distributed around a greater area. Same amount of heat distributed around a larger area, lower average temperature. This is absolutely trivial to understand. It's why magnifying glasses can focus light to a point and set things on fire. It's how heat works. Flat Earth priests know this. They just pretend to be confused about things that they know their viewers won't check up on. Number 9. Many flat earthers refer to the body of scientific knowledge as scientism. This is meant to be derogatory, implying that science is a religion. I'm very sorry, but saying this just demonstrates that you know nothing about science and probably didn't pass a single science class in high school. Science students are not told what to believe. They are shown how to perform experiments. Even in high school physics, students use blocks and ramps and balls and pendulums and carts and rulers and timers to derive Newton's laws and many other such pillars of science. They personally do the science that has already been done by others in order to derive the knowledge that we already know and prove its validity to themselves. This continues through college and then on into graduate school, where students do their own research and figure out things that no one else has done yet. So using the word scientism only serves to disqualify you from adult conversation regarding science. In actuality, it is quite clear why you adopt this viewpoint, because you just accept whatever you hear if it's what you want to believe. This is why your beliefs are baseless. Since you are incapable of doing anything other than repeating what you are told, you assume that others are doing the same thing, but they are not. Those that are educated in the sciences understand how things work and use this information to build technology, such as computers and the internet, both of which you use to claim that the science that produced them isn't real, in a display of irony so thick that you could cut it with a knife. And to wrap things up, number 10, the pièce de résistance, the claim that we have all been indoctrinated, that we have been brainwashed by schools, by the government, by NASA, by Freemasons, by Hollywood. Take your pick. Well, as I have demonstrated in this clip, you all say the same exact ridiculous things word for word, like you're reciting the oath of the Flat Earth fraternity. So it's a rather silly accusation to be throwing around. The fact that you all say the same things is not surprising in the slightest. What do you do when you want to brainwash someone? You tell them they have already been brainwashed. That's what Flat Earth priests do. They tell you that you've been brainwashed so that you are nice and receptive to the brainwashing. They tell you that everything you know is a lie so that they can lie to you. It's Human Psychology 101. Why do they do this? Money, status. It's a way for con men to capitalize on the gullible few who exhibit a combination of ignorance and suggestibility. It's a cult. You're part of a cult. Not like the kill yourselves with Kool-Aid kind, but it's not that far off. So get in. Let's call them 10 challenges for flat earthers. These will be some basic things that anyone could do to test the validity of the flat earth hypothesis. These are so mind-numbingly obvious that the fact that you don't do them is an immediate indicator of your complete lack of intellectual integrity. Let's get started and you'll see what I mean. Number 1, here's the flat earth map.
I need to warn you that in this video, this guy's a little sarcastic.
That you all seem to agree upon. Anyone with half a brain can immediately tell that this does not correlate with reality, but for those with an even smaller fraction, let's do a few things to prove it. For example... By the way, that's the same flat earth map on the UN logo that flat earthers say it's proving a flat earth. Make a scale. You know, a scale. It's that thing on maps that tells you how far away things are from each other. Look at this map. There's a scale. You can pick 2 cities and determine the approximate distance between them. Then you can drive your car from one to another and verify that it is the correct distance. Now back to your little map. Where's the scale here? Why do you never include one? Is it because it's impossible? Yes, that is exactly why. And if you disagree, here's your challenge. Pick some distance on this map. A centimeter, an inch, whatever. Tell me the distance it corresponds to in reality. Then pick some cities and use your scale to estimate the distances between them. Pick 2 on the same continent. Pick 2 on different continents. Use it to tell me how wide this inappropriately enormous ocean is. Use it to tell me literally anything about the distances between literally anything. When you can't do it and your numbers do not correlate with reality in the slightest, recall that this map does it just fine, and then admit that your map is stupid. Your complete inability to make any kind of remotely legitimate map single-handedly proves the Earth isn't flat. But let's continue just for fun. Number 2, as we all know, the existence of Antarctica poses a huge problem for you. When it is summer in the northern hemisphere, you love to pretend that the sun moves inwards to this tropic, making the days longer here and shorter in the southern hemisphere. And then when it's winter in the north, you like to put the sun at the other tropic, which you think gives you the shorter days up north that you want, but in the south, it's total chaos. You have the sun tracing this enormous trajectory, which would leave everything out here in darkness for most of the day, when in reality, there are long periods of time in Antarctica where the sun never sets. Since your dinky little sun can never illuminate this entire fantasy ice wall at once, this completely obliterates your model, which is why you resort to conspiracy. You simply deny that this midnight sun ever occurs, while claiming that no one can go to Antarctica to verify it for themselves, because the government NASA Jew penguins will kill you. Well, apart from all the commercial cruises, civilians can even apply for jobs there, so you totally could go see it for yourself. But you don't really have to go all the way to Antarctica. Just go to the tip of South America, like this town, where people live. Or don't even go there. Just look up times of sunrise and sunset on the internet. In mid-December, sunrise is earlier than 5 a.m., and sunset is later than 10 p.m. Now take your little model for the seasons and make it show night and day. Then try and make the night and day portions match up with these sunrise and sunset times. Demonstrate the light from the sun illuminating this location for more than 70% of its trajectory. And as you do that, make sure that it does not illuminate Point Barrow, Alaska whatsoever during its entire trajectory, as that town has endless night during this time of the year. That's right, lots of sun over here and zero sun over here. Good luck. If you decide to even try, observe that the light patterns become so nonsensical that not even the most meth-fueled creatives amongst you could vomit enough magnetism jargon to justify it. If you can't make your model show the seasons and night and day at the same time, as I pointed out that you can't almost a year ago, then seriously consider shutting up forever. Number 3, here's an idea. What if you were to actually make a prediction with your model? Like any prediction. You know, those things that you have to do in science for it to be science. Pick any celestial object, a planet, a comet, a star. Now pick any time in the future, and using only the flat Earth model and nothing else, tell me where it will be at that time. If you can't do this, and I know you can't, consider admitting that your model is absolutely irrelevant. People who actually understand the geometry of the Earth and the solar system can predict a solar eclipse, specifying the start and end time down to the second and tracing its precise path down to the square mile. Doing that even a single time means the model used to make the prediction has been undeniably verified, and it's done every single time. Anyone who doesn't see the importance of that has no clue how science works. Number 4, after I demolished essentially all of your favorite talking points in my previous videos, you all now cling primarily to the classic "I shouldn't see this thing" argument. You love this one because you can lie about heights and distances, do incorrect math, and in general act incredulous without having to actually do any science. Well, every time you whine about this, the objects are always suspiciously close, such that you can fudge the numbers, and they're always over water, so you can lie about refractive effects to people who have no idea how refraction works. So try this one on for size. Show me a picture of something over land that's 1,000 miles away. May I suggest the middle of the country where there's not much in the way? It's a straight shot after all, so what's the problem? Use a telescope. Pull Las Vegas into focus from Dallas, Texas. Isn't that where you have your little meeting? Maybe you should try doing something productive rather than blindly perpetuating the dumbest hoax on the internet. Number 5, speaking of things that are far away, you all love whipping out your Nikons so much that I wouldn't be surprised if a Nikon executive dreamt up the entire Flat Earth hoax as a viral marketing campaign. You take a boat that's far away, pull it back into focus, and then marvel at your own brilliance for figuring out how to operate a camera. Well, try this one then. Stay on the boat. Don't cut away. Stay on it until it disappears. How will it disappear? Bottom up, just like everything else. I wonder why you've never put that on YouTube. Number 6, the most hilarious thing about Flat Earth is that the most mundane everyday observations make absolutely no sense in your model. Like a sunset. A small sun above a flat Earth would simply recede high in the sky and get smaller and smaller until it fades away. It absolutely would not retain the same angular size and set below the horizon. It stays the same size because it's unbelievably far away, and it sets below the horizon because the Earth is a sphere that is turning. Even a toddler can understand this. It's so blatantly obvious that you have to resort to your typical ad hoc antics, talking about refractive effects that defy all logic and somehow magically apply to the sun but nothing else. Or even better, some of you talk about a dome with the sun on the other side that produces some bizarre optical effect. Apart from the sheer absurdity of this magical dome that no one has ever seen or touched, it creates big problems for you because you also claim that the sun and moon perform other kinds of magic to push the air and water around, to get tides and storms and what have you. That would require that it is inside the dome. So which is it? Is the sun outside of the magical non-existent dome so you can pretend to get the sunset? Or is it inside the magical non-existent dome so you can pretend to get the tides? It can't be both. Or if you bail on the dome and say it's just water, how do all those water molecules that make up around 1% of the atmosphere produce 1,000 times greater refractive effect than actual liquid water? How does the appearance of a sunset never vary at all, whether it's dry or humid or raining? Why does nothing else but the sun behave that way? Show me a projectile or a plane going below the horizon as it recedes. Or show me this dome and explain the phenomena with more than buzzwords. Do something to explain a sunset. Do anything besides making idiotic videos with action movie soundtracks that contradict middle school level science. Number 7. What the hell is a lunar eclipse to you? Seriously, explain anything about a lunar eclipse. The things you say about solar eclipses are stupid enough, but at least you say something. A lunar eclipse happens when the Earth gets between the sun and the moon. That's right, in between. These two objects are not perpetually above a flat plane, and you know it, which is why you're totally silent on lunar eclipses. And if you're going to propose that some other object besides the Earth is what obscures the moon, good luck trying to demonstrate its existence. Number 8. Speaking of the sun and moon being small and close to the Earth, what is stopping you from strapping a camera to a weather balloon and sending it up there? Go get up close and personal with either of these objects and take some pictures. If you get crafty with some robotics, which is a stretch given your complete lack of education, you could even scoop up a little sample. Maybe the moon is made of cheese after all. Can't you get even halfway there such that the sizes change? Reach for the sky, fellas. Number 9. Take some flights, like any direct flight in the southern hemisphere. Whoops, shouldn't that be impossible? Better yet, fly between two cities 2 different ways, the shortest way on the globe and the shortest way on the flat Earth. Which one do you think will be faster? I'm just joking. I know that none of you will ever be employed long enough to afford a private jet, but next time you're on a regular plane, notice that flights going east or west are not constantly turning slightly to one side, as you seem to believe they all must be. Yeah, you would notice that. If humanity is unfortunate enough that you've actually procreated, send your kid up to the cockpit to meet the pilot and snap a pic of the wheel. What do you know? Straight as an arrow. And number 10. Do anything legitimately scientific at all. Publish anything whatsoever about your model in anything reputable anywhere. Invent any technology based on your model. Do anything at all that could be considered actual empirical science. Here's a hint. You may have to study some real science to do it, but then of course you would immediately learn that the Earth isn't flat, so it probably won't be of much use.
Okay, now 3 shorts. This one's on the moon.
So instead, let's try some proofs that have nothing to do with science at all. There is no challenge. There is no prerequisite information. You just have to listen, acknowledge that the logic is airtight, and then cry yourself to sleep. Are you ready? Here comes one now. What is this object? It's the moon. We've all seen the moon. We've seen it many times. Look at all of these pictures of the moon. What do they have in common? They all show precisely the same features. We all see the same face of the moon. It doesn't change from night to night, and it doesn't change throughout the night. There is no denying this. You can't shout CGI. You can't cry conspiracy. It's the moon. We can all see it with our own eyeballs. It's there, and it always looks like this. Now let's place the moon above a flat disk and let it float around in the little magic circles you like to imagine. If the Earth was flat, would we all see the same face of the moon? Here is someone standing in one spot looking at the moon. They see this. Here is someone standing in another spot looking at the same moon. They see this too. And this person, and this person. You get the idea. So, is this possible? No, because that's not how objects work. People on the opposite sides of an object can't see the same face of the object. Go get two of your little buddies and have them stand on opposite sides of you. Can they both see the front of your face at once? No. A spherical moon over a flat Earth is not consistent with reality at all. So, is it two-dimensional with the same face on both sides? Then anyone but these two people would see a different shape, so no. Is it pointing down like a spotlight? Then it would change shape as it passes by and only appear circular when directly overhead, so no. Is there any way we can make this work on a flat Earth? No, there is not. So how, pray tell, do all people see the same face of the moon? Because Earth is a sphere and the moon goes around the Earth. It is tidally locked with the Earth, with one face always pointing towards the Earth. That's why everyone sees the same face of the moon, and that's the only way that everyone can see the same face of the moon. And guess what? The direction the moon is pointing even correlates with the observer's latitude. Isn't that something? Whether at the North Pole, South Pole, or anywhere in between, the orientation of the face of the moon that we all see will reveal your latitude on the spherical Earth. Pretty neat, huh? Maybe one day you'll save up enough allowance that you can leave your mom's basement and see the moon from another part of the world. So
Another short on the stars.
Last time we looked at the moon, so today let's look at the stars. Flat earthers love to complain about how dumb it is to look up at the sky to determine the shape of the Earth, but that's only because doing so specifically proves that it's a sphere, and it's one of the ways we figured out that it's a sphere thousands of years ago. For example, if you're at a northerly latitude facing northwards and you watch the stars for a while, you will notice that they appear to rotate counterclockwise around a
X, it's your X.
Sky. This point is roughly aligned with the star Polaris, which we call the North Star. If you were to then travel south for a while, you would see that certain stars are no longer viewable, and at the equator, all the stars move directly east to west through the sky. Then, heading towards the southerly latitudes and facing south, you will see a whole new batch of stars you couldn't see in the north, and they will again be rotating around a point in the sky, though this time clockwise instead of counterclockwise. So how do we make sense of these observations? Do they work on a flat Earth? Not even a little bit. That the sky would be doing different things for different people just because they are standing closer or further from the center of a disk is total nonsense. That's why flat earthers avoid this subject altogether unless they have the balls to invent idiotic sorcery like personal domes and other fantasies that are not even worth deconstructing. Furthermore, why can't people towards the outer edge see the same stars as people towards the center? And vice versa. What's blocking the light? Again, no explanation. Now, what would happen on a sphere that is turning? Standing up north, whichever point in the sky is aligned with the rotational axis would appear not to move, and everything else would rotate around it, just like we see. Standing in the south, same thing, but the opposite direction from their perspective. Also, any star that would require a line of sight that cuts through the Earth is not visible because we can't see through the Earth. That's why Southerners can't see Polaris and Northerners can't see the Southern Cross. But that's not all. Literally all observations of the sky from the Southern Hemisphere are utterly inexplicable on the flat Earth. Consider people standing towards the southern tips of South America, Africa, and Australia. They all can see the Southern Cross when they look south, and two of them at a time can even see it simultaneously, depending on the time of night. Does that make any sense with these folks all looking in completely different directions? None whatsoever. Come to think of it, what does south even mean on a flat Earth? It's totally nonsensical. But again, on a sphere, south actually means something, and all these people are looking in the same direction towards the south celestial pole, so they can all see the same sky, no problem. Now, most flat earthers have heard all of this before, and instead of admitting to themselves that the logic is airtight, they just ignore all of it and bring up unrelated, objectively incorrect talking points. At least 1,000 times I've been asked why the stars don't change throughout the year if we are orbiting the sun. Well, they do. The stars that lie near the ecliptic are obscured half the year because they are on the other side of the sun, and we can't see stars during the daytime because of how bright the sun is. These are the zodiac constellations, the ones from astrology, so it's shocking that you're not familiar with them since you're so in love with pseudoscience. The stars that can be viewed in a direction closer to perpendicular to the ecliptic are seen throughout the year, and there's no logical basis for thinking that they wouldn't be. They're really far away. Earth's orbital radius is negligible in comparison. But because of Earth's orbit, they do shift their positions slightly throughout the year. It's called stellar parallax. I would link to my tutorial that explains what that is, but I know learning is not really your thing. Here it is anyway. Give it a look if you're feeling bold.
And last one, a bit more proof on the airline flights.
It's to show that Flat Earth is the dumbest hoax on the entire internet. One thing that anyone can do to prove that the Earth is a sphere is to look at commercial airline flights. Let's revisit the Flat Earth map, or the thing they pretend isn't their map, but it totally is, because they can't make a map, so they just use this. Embarrassingly for them, this is actually an azimuthal equidistant projection of the globe. That's right, the Flat Earth map is a map of the globe, taken from the perspective of looking down at the North Pole and flattening out its surface into a plane so that a three-dimensional surface can be shown in 2 dimensions. That's why everything is distorted with no consistent scale. Secretly, Flat Earth priests know what this is, and they know it doesn't work, but they're dumb and lazy and can't come up with anything better, so they stick with this and simply deflect anytime these facts are brought up. Now, the further away from the center you go, the more significant the distortion, so problems really arise in the southern hemisphere. That's where the flights come in. Here's South America. Here's Australia. Pretty far away, huh? If this map was taken to be precisely to scale, which it would be if the Earth was actually flat, then they're as far away as 2 places can get. Let's say we wanted to fly between Santiago and Sydney. If the Earth was flat, which way would we go? Well, the straight line path would go up across all of South America, all of North America, over Alaska, and then continuing all the way until we get to Sydney. So, do any airlines actually fly between these cities? Yes, they do. This airline flies between Santiago and Sydney 4 times a week. But which way do they go? Do they follow this straight line? Nope. They do the whole thing over the Pacific Ocean. Here's how that trip looks on a globe. It takes 14 hours and 15 minutes going west and 12 hours and 25 minutes going east. On a flat Earth, that route would look like this, an absurdly long and totally unnecessary arc. For comparison, how long does it take to fly between New York City and London? It's about 7 hours going east and about 8 hours going west. Now, you tell me, does it make sense that a plane would travel this enormous arc in less than twice the time that it would take to travel this teeny tiny one? Not even a little bit. First of all, the fact that these are arcs at all is totally nonsensical. Planes don't constantly turn slightly left or right. They lock into a flight path and go straight. Flat Earthers like to whine about how planes don't constantly dip down to match the curvature of the Earth, but that's because they have no clue how planes work, since they maintain constant altitude, and altitude conforms to the curvature of the Earth. So how do Flat Earthers deal with this information? Well, for the longest time, they simply denied that these Southern Hemisphere flights exist at all. The flights are a nail in the coffin for Flat Earth, so they would just lie and say there aren't any. But since anyone can find out that they definitely do exist in about 10 seconds of Googling, some of them have had to start coughing up explanations. The most popular of these is to pretend that the wind is responsible. Again, this is because Flat Earthers are lazy. Small differences in flight times going east versus west occur because planes fly with or against wind currents. So they just take this concept and bring it to an absurd conclusion. They will evoke currents of several hundred miles per hour, which would be a world record hurricane, and pretend that the plane is somehow traveling twice as fast as usual without anyone noticing. There are several problems here. First of all, this boost from the imaginary wind still isn't anywhere near enough. This arc is stupid long. The plane would have to be going several thousand miles per hour, and planes don't do that. Second, this flight goes both directions, east and west. How does the wind know which way the plane is going? Most days, there are planes going opposite directions simultaneously. Does each of them have a little personal tornado, like in Wizard of Oz? Flat Earthers have suggested things as stupid as personal domes, such that everyone gets their own set of stars, so sadly this wouldn't even be the dumbest thing they've ever said. But as you can see, there's no way around this. These flights exist. They are not traveling this insane distance because this is a projection of the globe without a consistent scale. The problem with the projection map they push as reality is that as we go towards the South Pole on a globe, the latitude lines are clearly getting shorter and shorter. But on this flat representation, they are being represented as longer and longer, so distances get more and more distorted the further outwards you go. That's why pretending this is a real map is stupid, and that's why flat earth priests pretend the southern hemisphere doesn't exist. It ruins everything for them. As for their whining that flights don't travel over Antarctica, well, there's no reason for them to do that. The shortest path, which we call a great circle for any common route, doesn't pass directly over Antarctica. Some get pretty close, like Johannesburg to Melbourne. If it were to be flown, Johannesburg to Christchurch would nick the edge of Antarctica, but this isn't a regular flight. Why? Because the latter isn't a major city, so not enough people would be interested in the flight so as to make the route profitable for an airline. In fact, there are very few large cities in the southern hemisphere in general. Because of the way the continents are distributed around the Earth, 90% of the human population lives in the northern hemisphere. But much to the dismay of flat earth priests, the southern hemisphere still exists, and its existence is single-handedly enough to make them cry like toddlers that found out the Easter Bunny isn't real.
Okay, a little more.
Flat earthers don't even do this. Most of you address this problem by simply listing two words, density and buoyancy. Well, I hate to break it to you guys, but these are not forces. Forces are vectors. They have a magnitude, which means a numerical amount, and a direction, which means they have to point somewhere. Density is simply mass per unit volume, or how much...
Sorry, didn't want that, but here he's talking about, hey, the flat earthers try to baffle you with bullshit on momentum. It's kind of midstream, but a flat tard, and he explains it.
Yeah, you got it. So, are we good here?
But if you do a test on a train or, like you said, on a plane, and just simply jog from the front of a moving train to the rear, and maybe time yourself, or just observe, and then do the same thing running or jogging to the front of the moving train. I've done this myself. I promise you that you'll find that it is much easier to run from the front of the train to the rear.
That's your test? Pretty tough to reproduce, don't you think? Here's an idea. What if it was harder to jog to the front of the train because the train was speeding up slightly? Try it again when the train is slowing down. I bet your results will change. Sorry, this is not a valid experiment.
25-mile target from the New Jersey has a flight time of 90 seconds. So you're aiming 90 degrees from the ship straight to the equator to hit that lighthouse. And it takes 90 seconds for the bullet to get there. Problem is, in 90 seconds at the equator, the Earth moves 25 miles. So it takes 90 seconds for the bullet to get from the ship to the lighthouse. But in that 90 seconds, the lighthouse moves 25 miles. So you're going to miss it by 25 miles.
Here's the funny part. You so thoroughly don't understand conservation of momentum that when you presented this whole bit to me, it was supposed to have something to do with the Coriolis effect. But like I said, this basic fact of physics has nothing to do with the atmosphere. The boat and the bullet and lighthouse are all moving around the Earth together, and the bullet will continue with the same momentum that the boat has once it leaves the gun. Again, super easy to prove. Get back on that moving truck. This time, bring a friend, and pass a ball back and forth. You will observe that the ball does not fly off the back of the truck when it leaves your hands. Instead, you will be passing it precisely as you would expect if you were just standing on the ground. Another way of expressing this is that you two and the ball and the truck constitute an inertial reference frame. This is another thing that you guys have a really hard time with, so let's go through that too.
Here is a much more accurate depiction in the heliocentric model of what our solar system is actually doing. Now, where is Kepler's laws in this particular model, Dave? The mathematics for this are not being taken into account.
This graphic is stupid. The blue trails don't exist or mean anything, and the solar system is not a vortex. All the motion happens within a plane, and we see that plane in the sky. It's called the ecliptic, where all the planets live. But more importantly, what you're trying to imply is that because the solar system is moving through the galaxy, this should change all the laws of physics. It doesn't. Here's why. Let's do another experiment. Drop a ball and see how long it takes to hit the ground. Now let's get back on that truck, move at a constant velocity relative to the ground, and do it again. We get the same thing. Now get on a plane and do it again. The plane is moving much faster, but you still get the same result. Each of these is an inertial reference frame. The laws of physics are exactly the same in every inertial reference frame, so the results of this experiment are the same in each of these frames, no matter what speed it is moving relative to something else. That's because all motion is relative to something else. So I'm sorry, it doesn't matter how fast the solar system is moving relative to the center of the Milky Way, or how fast the Milky Way is moving relative to some other galaxy. There is no absolute motion. There is only...
Okay, I think I'm out of time on my backup phone, but you got the picture. Oh, and I'm going to warn you again, this guy's a little sarcastic. And here.